Hey, Ms.T here with Chapter 6 of To Kill a Mockingbird. Sad about the news that I won't get to see y'all in class again this semester, but glad we still have opportunities like this to read together. So let's get started. Chapter 6 is still another chapter of the students just kind of living their summer adventures, creating some background about Maycomb. Today the kids are going to play strip poker, or what they think is strip poker. A little more suspense going on with Boo Radley. The kids are trying to sneak into his house, just kind of like they were in Chapter 5. So let's go ahead and get started. Yes, said our father, when Jim asked him if we could go over and sit by Miss Rachel's fishbowl with Dill, as this was his last night in Maycomb, so the summer's over. Tell him so long for me, and we'll see him next summer. We leaped over the low wall that separated Miss Rachel's yard from our driveway. Jim whistled Bob White, and Dill answered in the darkness. Not a breath blowing, said Jim. Look at yonder. He pointed to the east. A gigantic moon was rising behind Miss Molly's pecan trees. That makes it seem hotter, he said. Is there a cross in it tonight? Asked Dill, not looking up. He was constructing a cigarette from newspaper and string. No, just the lady. Don't light that thing, Dill. You'll stink up this whole end of town. There was a lady in the moon in Maycomb. She sat at the dresser combing her hair. We're going to miss you, boy, I said. Reckon we better watch for Mr. Avery? Mr. Avery boarded across the street from Mrs. Henry Lafayette DeBose's house. Besides making change in the collection plate every Sunday, Mr. Avery sat on the porch every night until 9 o'clock and sneezed. One evening we were privileged to witness a performance by him which seemed to have been his positively last, for he never did it again so long as we watched. Jim and I were leaving Miss Rachel's front steps one night when Dill stopped us. Golly, look at yonder. He pointed across the street. At first we saw nothing but a kudzu-covered front porch, but a closer inspection revealed an arc of water descending from the leaves and splashing in the yellow circle of the streetlight, some 10 feet from source to earth, it seemed to us. Jim said Mr. Avery misfigured. Dill said he must drink a gallon a day, and the ensuing contest to determine relative distance and respective prowess only made me feel left out again, as I was untalented in this area. So I don't know if you caught that, but they're watching Mr. Avery pee off the front porch, like 10 feet away to this light pole, and Dill and Jim are like, whoa, it's so cool, and Scout says she feels left out because she can't do that. Dill stretched John and said altogether too casually, I know what, let's go for a walk. He sounded fishy to me. Nobody in Maycomb just went for a walk. Where to, Dill? Dill jerked his head in a southerly direction. Jim said, okay. When I protested, he said sweetly, you don't have to come along, Angel May. You don't have to go, remember? Jim was not one to dwell on past defeats. It seemed the only message he got from Atticus was insight into the art of cross-examination. Scout, we ain't going to do anything. We're just going to the streetlight and back. We strolled silently down the sidewalk, listening to porch swings creaking with the weight of the neighborhood, listening to the soft night murmurs of the grown people on our street. Occasionally we heard Miss Stephanie Crawford laugh. Well, said Dill. Okay, said Jim. Why don't you go on home, Scout? What are you going to do? Dill and Jim were simply going to peep in the window with a loose shutter to see if they could get a look at Boo Radley, and if I didn't want to go with them, I could go straight home and keep my fat, flopping mouth shut. That was all. But why in the Sam Holy Hill did you wait till tonight? Because nobody would see him at night, because Atticus would be so deep in a book he wouldn't hear the kingdom coming, because if Boo Radley killed him, they'd miss school instead of vacation, and because it was easier to see inside a dark house in the dark than in the daytime. Did I understand? Jim, please. Scout, I'm telling you for the last time, shut your trap or go home. I declare to the Lord to get more like a girl every day. With that, I had no option but to join them. We thought it was better to go under the high wire fence at the rear of the Radley lot. We stood less chance of being seen. The fence enclosed a large garden and a narrow wooden outhouse. Jim held up the bottom wire and motioned Dill under it. I followed and held up the wire for Jim. It was a tight squeeze. Don't make a sound, he whispered. Don't get in the row of collars, whatever you do. They'll wake the dead. With this thought in mind, I made perhaps 1 step per minute. I moved faster when I saw Jim far ahead, beckoning in the moonlight. We came to the gate that divided the garden from the backyard, and Jim touched it, and the gate squeaked. Spit on it, whispered Dill. You've got us in a box, Jim, I muttered. We can't get out of here so easy. Shh! Spit on it, Scout. We spat ourselves dry, and Jim opened the gate slowly, lifting it aside and resting it on the fence. We were in the backyard. The back of the Radley house was even less inviting than the front. A ramshackle porch ran the width of the house. There were 2 doors and 2 dark windows between the doors. Instead of a column, a rough 2x4 supported one end of the roof. An old Franklin stove sat in the corner of the porch. Above it, a hat rack mirror caught the moon and shone eerily. Said Jim softly, lifting his foot. What's the matter? Chickens, he breathed. That we would be obliged to dodge the unseen from all directions was confirmed when Dill ahead of us spelled G-O-D in a whisper. We crept up to the side of the house, around to the window with a hanging shutter. The sill was several inches taller than Jim. "Give you a hand up," he muttered to Dill. "Wait, though." Jim grabbed his left wrist and my right wrist, and I grabbed my left wrist and Jim's right wrist, and we crouched, and Dill sat on our saddle. We raised him, and he caught the windowsill. "Hurry," Jim whispered. "We can't last much longer." Dill punched my shoulder, and we lowered him to the ground. "What'd you see?" "Nothing. Curtains. There's a little teeny light way off somewhere, though." "Let's get away from here," breathed Jim. "Let's go around and back again." "Shh," he warned me as I was about to protest. "Let's try the back window." "Dill, no," I said. Dill stopped and let Jim go ahead. When Jim put his foot on the bottom step, the step squeaked. He stood still, then tried his weight by degrees, and the step was silent. Jim skipped 2 steps, put his foot on the porch, heaved himself to it, and teetered a long moment. He regained his balance and dropped to his knees. He crawled to the window, raised his head, and looked in. Then I saw the shadow. It was the shadow of a man with a hat on. At first I thought it was a tree, but there was no wind blowing, and tree trunks never walked. The back porch was bathed in moonlight, and the shadow, crisp as toast, moved across the porch towards Jim. Dill saw it next. He put his hands to his face. When it crossed Jim, Jim saw it. He put his arms over his head and went rigid. The shadow stopped about a foot beyond Jim. Its arm came out from its side, dropped, and was still. Then it turned and moved back across Jim, walked along the porch and off the side of the house, returning as it had come. Jim leaped off the porch and galloped toward us. He flung open the gate, danced Dill and me through, and shooed us between 2 rows of swishing collards. Halfway through the collards, I tripped. As I tripped, the roar of a shotgun shattered the neighborhood. That's the dogs. Dill and Jim died beside me. Jim's breath came in sobs. "Fence by the schoolyard. Hurry, Scout." Jim held the bottom wire. Dill and I rolled through and were halfway to the shelter of the schoolyard's solitary oak when we sensed that Jim was not with us. We ran back and found him struggling in the fence, kicking his pants off to get loose. He ran to the oak tree in his shorts, and they mean like his boxer shorts, drawers. Safely behind it, we gave way to numbness, but Jim's mind was racing. "We gotta get home, they'll miss us." We ran across the schoolyard, crawled under the fence to deer's pasture behind our house, climbed our back fence, and were at the back steps before Jim could let us pause to rest. Respiration normal, the 3 of us strolled as casually as we could to the front yard. We looked down the street and saw a circle of neighbors at the Radley front gate. "We better go down there," said Jim. "They'll think it's funny if we don't show up." Mr. Nathan Radley was standing inside his gate, a shotgun broken across his arm. Atticus was standing beside Miss Maudie and Miss Stephanie Crawford. Miss Rachel and Mr. Avery were nearby. None of them saw us come up. We eased in beside Miss Maudie, who looked around. "Where were you all? Didn't you hear the commotion?" "What happened?" asked Jim. "Mr. Riley shot at a Negro in his collard patch." "Oh, did he hit him?" "No," said Miss Stephanie. "Shot in the air. Scared and pale, though. Says if anybody sees a white around, that's the one. Says he's got the other barrel waiting for the next sound he hears in that patch. And next time he won't aim high, be it dog, in, or..." "Jim, Finch!" "Ma'am?" asked Jim. Atticus spoke. "Where are your pants, son?" "Pants, sir?" "Pants. It was no use. In his shorts before God and everybody." I sighed. Mr. Finch?" In the glare from the street light, I saw Dill hatching a lie. His eyes widened and his fat cherub, meaning like angel-like, face grew rounder. "What is it, Dill?" asked Atticus. I won him from him," he said vaguely. "Won them? How?" Dill's hand sought the back of his head. He brought it forward and across his forehead. "We were playing strip poker up yonder by the fish pool," he said. Jim and I relaxed. The neighbors seemed satisfied, and they all stiffened. But what was strip poker? We had no chance to find out. Miss Rachel went off like the town fire siren. "Do Jesus, Dill Harris, gambling by my fish pool. I'll strip poker you, sir." Atticus saved Dill from immediate dismemberment. "Just a minute, Miss Rachel," he said. "I've never heard of him doing that before. Were you all playing cards?" Jim fielded Dill's fly with his eyes shut. "No, sir, just with matches. I admired my brother. Matches were dangerous, but cards were fatal." Okay, so here, a couple of different things. When it says Jim fielded Dill's fly, that's a reference to baseball. So Jim came up with this plan that they were playing strip poker to explain the absence of Jim's pants, but that's going to get him in more trouble too. Also the line about matches are deadly, but cards are fatal should make us think you can't die from cards, but you can die from matches. You can set something on fire. But in their belief, sorry about this stupid fire going. Um, gambling was a big no-no. So had the kids been caught playing with actual playing cards, they would have been in much more in trouble than they were actually playing with matches. And it's just supposed to be satirical, make us laugh. Like, you don't want your kids to play with matches. But somehow in this old South, super religious community, that's better than playing with actual matches. Okay. Jim, Scout, said Atticus. I don't want to hear poker in any form again. Go buy Dills and get your pants, Jim. Settle it yourselves. Don't worry, Dill, said Jim as we trotted up the sidewalk. She ain't gonna get you. He'll talk her out of it. That was fast thinking, son. Listen, you hear? We stopped and heard Atticus's voice. Oh, not serious. They all go through it, Miss Rachel. Dill was comforted, but Jim and I weren't. There was a problem of Jen showing up with some pants in the morning. I'd give you some of mine, said Dill as we came to Miss Rachel's steps. Jim said he couldn't get in them anyway, but thanks. We said goodbye, and Dill went inside the house. He evidently remembered he was engaged to me, for he ran back out and kissed me swiftly in front of Jim. You all right, you hear? He bawled after us. Had Jim's pants been safely on him, we would not have slept much anyway. Every night sound I heard from my cot on the back porch was magnified threefold. Every scratch of feet on gravel was Boo Radley seeking revenge. Every passing Negro laughing in the night was Boo Radley loose and after us. Insects splashing against the screen were Boo Radley's insane fingers picking the wire to pieces. The chinaberry trees were malignant, hovering and alive. I lingered between sleep and wakefulness until I heard Jim murmur, You sleep, little Three Eyes? You crazy? Shh, Atticus's light's out. In the waning moonlight, I saw Jim swing his feet to the floor. I'm going after him, he said. I sat upright. You can't, I won't let you. He was struggling into his shirt. I've got to. You do and I'll wake up Atticus. You do and I'll kill you. I pulled him down beside me on the cot. I tried to reason with him. Mr. Nathan's going to find him in the morning, Jim. He knows you lost him. When he shows him to Atticus, it'll be pretty bad. But that's all there is to it. Now go on back to bed. That's what I know, said Jim. That's why I'm going after him. I began to feel sick. Going back to that place by himself. I remembered Miss Stephanie. Mr. Nathan had the other barrel waiting for the next sound he heard. Jim knew that better than I. I was desperate. Look, it ain't worth it, Jim. A licking hurts but doesn't last. You'll get your head shot off, Jim, please. He blew out his breath patiently. It's like this, Scout, he muttered. Atticus ain't ever with me since I can remember, and I want to keep it that way. This was a thought. It seemed that Atticus threatened us every other day. You mean he's never caught you in anything? Maybe so, but I just want to keep it that way, Scout. We shouldn't have done that tonight. It was then, I suppose, that Jim and I first began to part company. Sometimes I did not understand him, but my periods of bewilderment were short-lived. This was beyond me. Please, I pleaded, can't you just think about it for a minute by yourself on that place? Shut up. It's not like I never speak to you again or something. I'm going to wake him up, Jim. I swear I am. Jim grabbed my pajama collar and wrenched it tight. Then I'm going with you, I choked. No, you ain't. You'll just make noise. It was no use. I unlatched the back door and held it while he crept down the steps. It must have been 2 o'clock. The moon was setting and the lattice-work shadows were fading into fuzzy nothingness. Jim's white shirt tail dipped and bobbed like a small ghost, dancing away to escape the coming morning. A faint breeze stirred and cooled the sweat running down my sides. He went the back way through Deer's pasture, across the schoolyard and around the fence. I thought, at least that was the way he was headed. It would take longer, so it was not time to worry yet. I waited until it was time to worry and listened for Mr. Riley's shotgun. Then I thought I heard the back fence squeak. It was wishful thinking. Then I heard Atticus cough, and I held my breath. Sometimes when we made a midnight pilgrimage to the bathroom, we'd find him reading. He said he often woke up during the night, checked on us, and read himself back to sleep. I waited for his light to go on, straining my eyes to see it flood the hall. It stayed off, and I breathed again. The night crawlers had retired, but ripe china berries drummed on the roof when the wind stirred, and the darkness was desolate with the barking of distant dogs. There Jim was, returning to me. His white shirt bobbed over the back fence and slowly grew larger. He came up the back steps, latched the door behind him, and sat on his cot. Wordlessly, he held up his pants. He lay down, and for a while I heard his cot trembling. Soon he was still, and I did not hear him stir again. So, I love this chapter. I think the strip poker really is hilarious by the kids. But also there's a couple other themes that are continuing to be developed, or topics I should say. This idea of what's honorable. Scout can't understand that Jim would risk his life to not disappoint Atticus. But Jim doesn't want Atticus to know that he lied, because that would not be honorable, and that would strain their relationship in a way that Jim's not prepared to have happen. He's willing to go risk his life to go back on the Radley lot where Nathan Radley's already said he's shooting at the next thing he sees at the house. Mr. Nathan Radley also was told when he found, heard something in his backyard, he assumed it was a black person. Says that goofy line like scared him pale though, which is just supposed to make us as the readers think that it's ridiculous. We also know it was 3 white children, and that's sort of just establishing a precedent of racism that exists in the town. Atticus, these dogs are crazy. Atticus has a whole leaf stuck in his back of his leg. All right, well, I'll be back with y'all tomorrow at chapter 7, and I hope you're doing okay, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.